Welcome to the Hype Pod, where we have real conversations on business, tech, innovation, and culture trends, all from a faith-filled perspective. Today, we have Pastor Alen Yaghoubi. He's a forensic psychologist who has worked with inmates in state prisons, a professor of psychology at San Jose State, and a pastor of Vive Church. He spent his career understanding what makes people tick, from criminals to cops to successful entrepreneurs, all while exploring the profound connections between modern psychology and the mind of Christ. Pastor Alen, it's an honor and nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit. I actually want to just jump in to kind of your story a little bit. You told me a little bit about it, but you actually were doubted, starting early, right? And tell us a little bit into that and how you actually then became a forensic psychologist.
Just really quickly, when I was in second grade, I got put into special education. I just was having a very hard time reading and writing. It felt like my brain wasn't working. And I just kind of did that for years. I was actually not very motivated when it came to academics. I didn't really try because of that. They always have to pull me out to go to like a different class, and that always felt weird. And so that was just my norm. And then in seventh grade, I remember my school said, like, let's give you a try. Let's put you like into like quote unquote regular classes, and let's see how you do. And it wasn't even like 6 months in. They're like, yeah, never mind. We're going to put you back in remedial classes and just kind of get you to do that. And then it wasn't until senior year of high school where I had an assignment that was due. I had one, and this is back when we would like write or like essays, not type them out. And so the teacher had asked for all of our essays to be turned in, and I just had like one sentence left. So I walked up to her and I said, hey, can I really like quickly finish this? If not, it's fine, I'll just submit it. And her response was just, and it was kind of like bustling in the classroom. Like it wasn't, everyone was just kind of talking and passing their papers up. And so she just looked at me. She's like, do you think you're special? And I was just kind of confused by that question because I was asking if I could turn in my homework. I was like, no. She's like, well, why do you think I'd give you extra time to turn in your paper? And I was like, oh, so if the answer is no, that's fine. I'll just submit it. And she's like, well, it doesn't really matter what you do anyway. And by this time, the class had kind of settled in. So everyone's kind of listening. She's like, well, it doesn't really matter if you do turn it in or don't, because it's not like you're going to college anyway. Jeez. And my response, and I don't recommend this, but my response, and it was just almost out of like disappointment in her, I just picked up my paper and I ripped it in half and I just like laid it on her like desk, and like the entire class got completely quiet and like looked, and I just walked back to my seat. And that was like my mentality around academics. It's like, oh, well, you're not smart enough, you can't really read, you can't really write, your teachers don't even believe in you. And so I had no plans or ambitions to go to college. And so it wasn't until I randomly in the middle of summer between, graduation and college starting, I talked to a friend, and it was more like the spontaneous thing of, hey, you should come to college. You should move where I'm moving and come to college and just try it out. And it was like this spontaneous thing. But looking back now, I know it was God like speaking to me, because now I can pinpoint those moments when like God was like highlighting something. And so sure enough, I applied to a community college. And my very first day of college, I just had this prayer at the end of the evening. I was just like walking back to my car, and I just said, God, if you get me to a doctorate, I'll use it for your glory. And it's like my brain got healed, but it was happening in like progressively. So like school just became super easy for me after that. My bachelor's degree was so much easier than high school for me. My master's was so much easier than my bachelor's. And my doctorate, like I say it was easier, but like a doctorate like can kill you.
Right. Yeah.
It's very hard. But it was just but I had the confidence of knowing like I'm gonna be able to do it. And what's so funny now across like different spheres that I work in, the one thing that I'm recognized for is my writing. And now because of ChatGPT, everyone's like, was that ChatGPT?
Yeah.
Like, no, it was not ChatGPT. It was my brain.
Right.
But what I really appreciate about that is like, it has nothing to do with me. I appreciate how people recognize what God healed. And so like it becomes moments of testimony whenever people say like, oh, that's amazing writing or whatever. I'm like, well, let me tell you why it's amazing. It's just something I always use to like glorify God.
Yeah, I love that. Talk about a little bit about your upbringing in faith as well, because it sounds like it was a key component to helping you overcome, some of these things where some people might have reverted a little bit, and you actually used it as like no, I'm going to overcome this.
So I was fortunate enough to be raised in like a very dynamic Pentecostal old school kind of church. My dad's actually a deacon of a church. So like the church that we would attend as kids was the one that he founded with like some other people. And so that was just like just so much exposure. Like we saw so many different things happen. And so interestingly, and I do look back on it, even though like I had the insecurity around like I'm not good at school, I never really internalized it as an identity.
Right.
I never was like, well, I'm just dumb and I can never do it and I'm not going to whatever. For some reason, it was kind of like, well, that's just not what I'm good at.
Yeah.
But I never felt bad about myself because of it. And so, looking back, I could definitely see how like the voice of God and how people around me who just would continually speak into me, how that was kind of like the counter to the lie, because it could have very easily been internalized. But my mom actually, it's so funny because like even though she knew all the stuff about me academically, she would always say to me as a young kid, "So you're gonna be a doctor one day. You're gonna be a doctor one day." And my mom was like, all right. Like that's like a lovely motherly thing to say, but we all know that's not going to happen. And so the fact that like she kept speaking that over me, and then it like ultimately I got my doctorate, it was just like this really profound moment of like your words and what you speak into people are profound. So I think that was kind of the biggest thing that allowed me to not internalize any of the negative.
Yeah, that's good. And then you picked forensic psychology, but how did that end up happening?
Yeah, so when I first got into psychology, I did not care for it. I was in high school. I had a friend who took it as an elective, the psychology class, and she asked if I could join her. I was like, I'm not taking psychology. That sounds like the most horrible thing in the world. And she's like, just do it. You need a class. We'll just do it together. It's our senior year. Who cares? So I took it, and after 2 weeks, I was like, I'm dropping this class. It is so boring. I can't sit here for the next year and do this. And she begged me, and then she offered to do my homework for me. So I was like, all right, I'll stick around for a year. I could do that. And weirdly enough, it wasn't until we covered sleep disorders, which I don't do anything related to sleep disorders, but it was that topic that really hooked me in. Just this idea of like, oh, people have like these sleep problems, like narcolepsy or insomnia. And from that moment on, I was just hooked. So everything.
And so I'm actually curious about this. Is it the psychology like behind why those things come about, or the effects of having the disorder?
No, the psychology of why it happens. So narcolepsy is more of like a neurobiological disorder. So it's less about like your emotional state or what you're feeling or thinking. It's more about like the biology of your brain. And so I just found that fascinating. I was like, oh, people just fall asleep just randomly on the spot. I'm like, how do they walk? How do they drive? How do they get around? And so we ended up going to like Stanford University as like a project, and they had a narcolepsy lab where they had fish who had narcolepsy. Oh, what? So they would like swim and then they like fall asleep and float to the top like they were dead, and then they would wake up, and just super fascinated by that. And then my psychology teacher would just do like these little experiments throughout the year, but wouldn't tell us, and then like reveal after the fact of like, oh, I wore the same outfit for a week straight
really cool.
to see like if you guys would pick up on it. And like I never noticed. But I think some of my friends were like, I think she's struggling financially, which speaks to like the social psychology of like what we think of people when we see them in like the same kind of clothes. But it wasn't until that I really started to like enjoy it. And it was my last day of school. It was like graduation day. I went up to her, my psychology teacher, and I said, I think this is the thing I want to do. I think I want to pursue psychology, not knowing like the academic endeavor it entailed, like a bachelor's, a master's, a doctorate. And I was like, I just don't know what I would want to do. And so she just gave me this sheet of paper and had all the different subspecialties on it, like child psychology, sports psychology. And the very last one was forensic psychology. And it was like a simple generalized one-liner of applying psychological principles to the criminal justice system. And again, looking back now, I know it was God, but when I read that, it's like something within me was like, that's what you're meant to pursue. And then she just told me about this like world-renowned forensic psychologist that was in our area. And she's like, if you can get 5 minutes with him, if you could just get him from his office walking to his car and you could talk to him, you're going to be advanced so much in your career because he has such wealth of knowledge. I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. And that was kind of like my first exposure to like mentorship. And so I just went about my business, started school, went to community college, took my classes. And it wasn't until I transferred to a 4-year college where I was just going through the catalog and I saw Intro to Forensic Psychology, and it was taught by that professor that she had mentioned. I was like, this is like amazing. Like, what a unique opportunity where she was talking about 5 minutes, but I get a whole semester. So I absolutely took his class and then connected with them, asked if I could be his TA that following semester. And I just remember like spending hours and hours like in his office or like at a cafe, grading papers, helping with whatever, and just thinking like, she said 5 minutes would get me ahead. And I'm spending hours and hours every week.
And could you tell instantly from like just being under him how amazing he was at
Just like he had so much experience and so much and he was very real about it. Like he's like, when you're early in your career, you're trying to impress people, you're trying to look a certain way. He's like, but once you get to a certain spot, you realize like you actually need to give back. So like he just had like a lot of insight that went beyond just the field. And so I really appreciated that. But I quite literally asked him, I'm like, I want to be a forensic psychologist. I want to do what you do. How do I do it? And he literally just gave me step-by-step instructions, and I just mimicked it. I didn't deviate at all.
Yeah.
And then I ended up running into him years later and, just catching up. And he's like, what do you do now? I'm like, I'm a forensic psychologist. And he was just kind of like shocked by that because he's like, wow, you actually did it. Because it's a lot, but when God has something on you, like you just have to put in the time and the commitment, and things will happen. So
was it you wanted to be a forensic psychologist to teach, or did you want to be practicing?
I want to be practicing. So for me, and I always have like this weird spectrum in my mind. It's like I see the world in a spectrum from like Mother Teresa to like Hitler, right? That's my spectrum of the world, and I'm like, what causes people to be placed anywhere along that spectrum? Like, what is it? Is it like situation? Is it the way they were brought up? Is it environmental factors? And then can we do anything about it? Can somebody who's closer to like the extreme side of like violence, can you actually move them along towards like the Mother Teresa side through intervention, through whatever it might be? And so that's always been like a question that I always ask myself. And so that's kind of what got me into forensic psychology in the first place. It was just like that intrigue of like, why do people act the way they do? Like what causes people to do that? And then for me, one of the biggest like psychological studies that was like pretty profound was like the Stanford prison study with Zimbardo. I don't know if like Dr. Zimbardo.
Yeah, explain it for the audience.
Yeah, so just a study where he took graduate students and he put them in this like fake mock prison, and within like 24 to 48 hours, the fake correctional officers started to become extremely like inappropriate and like violent, like towards, and this is all fake. But they actually start to act out like in a very like inappropriate way, like abusing authority, trying to shame them, like all this stuff. And he ended up writing a book called The Lucifer Effect. And it's like this whole idea of like, how do good people become bad, or how do good people become evil? And because that fake study was replicated, like let's replicate it in anywhere where you have authority and you don't have any oversight, people will abuse their power. Which speaks to a very Lucifer-like thing. Right. And so for me, that's always been interesting. It's like, why do people end up that way? Can we do anything to intervene? So that's always been like the thing I'm exploring. So no, I've never wanted to go into academics. I actually was so burned out from school that like when I was asked to teach as a guest lecturer, I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna go back to school. But it was different. I like went into clinical. I worked in prisons for many, many years, and then I had the opportunity to go and teach. So I did, and the students were just so engaging and just so like interested. That I was like, like if an opportunity ever presents itself, I'll teach. And I had a colleague who worked at San Jose State, and she's like, we have a class if you're willing to like teach, and I'll put in a good word for you. You can interview, and we'll see what happens. And that was 7 years ago. And so like my favorite part is when students reach out and ask like how to become a forensic psychologist, like, what they have to do, and I almost feel like the mentor I had, and I was like, I'm not as old as him. But it's really cool just to be like, well, this is what I did, and they have so many questions around like academics and career options and like salary, like how do you tie all that together, and like what are your options? And with me, I'm so like I do a lot of different things. I'm not just doing one thing. So I always like to tell them that, like, you could do so many different things. You don't have to pick one job and do that for the rest of your life.
What I like is it's like a full circle moment. You had a teacher that kind of tried to stunt a little bit of your growth. Then you had a really good mentor, and now you are actually that mentor for many kids moving forward. But I actually want to dive into a little bit about what you do. You say you do many things. You have a private practice to kind of help do forensic psychology for a state penitentiary, correct? And then also you do state evals for professions like cops, firefighters. I actually wanted to just examine a little bit about the work that you do there. So when you examine criminals, for example, they're do really malicious things, and you have to understand the behavior there. And you mentioned some of the like sympathizing a little bit with like how they kind of get to that point, and if there is any way to kind of fix that, which is a little bit what goes along with the faith aspects that you kind of bring into this. And then there's the side of evaluating cops as well. And you brought up the kind of story of like, this study at Stanford that happened. I'm curious the distinction between criminals, and I just bring up cops, but really anybody in that state. Is the line actually much thinner than we think about what drives somebody that has power and to use it for harm or versus using it to protect?
Oh yeah, I think we all feel better about ourselves because we think we're so vastly different from like other people. But I think even from like a spiritual context, like we're all sinners and we've all fallen short. So it's like that reality is true across like the spectrum. But yeah, it's just circumstances. I think I mean, there's obviously psychological traits that play a part in things, but when I sit down with people at the prison, for example, and I go through their chart and I go through their history and I go into every nook and cranny of like their life, I'm not surprised that they ended up in prison. It's like, yeah, like I would be shocked if you didn't end up in prison because it's like, I even said this like last week when I was preaching. Whatever TV or movies have shown about like the criminal justice system, it's all like so much more fluffy in Hollywood than it is in reality.
Okay.
It is so much more worse in reality what people go through. And so when you sit down and you talk to someone, and I get society, I appreciate society doesn't care. Like society's like, you're a criminal, you've committed a crime, you should be in prison, that's your punishment. We don't care why. And I get that, I appreciate that, that's fine. But when you're sitting across the table from someone and then they're like, yeah, they've experienced like extreme abuse of all kinds, being exposed to like extreme forms of like violence and drugs. And I mean, the list is endless and you're shocked. You're like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like, and then I just end up having so much more like appreciation for my upbringing. I was like, it wasn't perfect, but it wasn't that.
Right.
And so, yeah. And then I think with like, on the other side of that spectrum, I think, again, when I sit down with like the law enforcement or public safety people, like police officers, firefighters, whatever it might be, a lot of them, what's interesting is that they're trying to present as like these perfect people of like never doing anything wrong.
Right.
And that's actually a red flag for us. Like when we're assessing for that, because we know everyone has a past. We know everyone has made mistakes. The idea is like, was your mistake last week or was your mistake like a year ago? You know, because that makes a difference because we're talking about like judgment and impulsivity, like things like that.
Yeah.
And so we'll always tell people like right off the bat, like, we understand you have a past. The worst thing you can do is lie.
Are they hooked up to a lie detector, or is this more you're just trying to read them without
They
that?
go through a polygrapher, so they have that, but that's not with me.
Okay,
I
got
get the
it.
results of that, but that's not what I do. But
Okay.
I'll see the results of like if they had we call it a significant reaction because you can't say somebody's necessarily lying.
Oh, right, right.
Because they might just be nervous or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
But I'll see that. But our thing is always looking for integrity. Like
Okay.
that's what the biggest thing. And it's so funny, the people who try to present as like these perfect beings, they'll like lie about things that like everyone's done. Like one common question we ask is like, what is the most aggressive thing you've ever done when feeling angry? And there are people who are like, I've never gotten angry. I'm like, yes, you have, because you're a human being.
Right.
Of course you've gotten angry.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I never have. I was like, and I'll ask that question, and then right when they respond like that, I will look at their psych profile because we have like their testing, and I'll be like, I bet anything like they're on their we call it a PIM, so like positive impression management, like how you present yourself, but you're trying to make yourself look really, really good in the testing, like the way you answer. I'll be like, I bet that's elevated. I bet they try to like appear as like a perfect angel, and I'll just jump to that really quick while I ask that question, and sure enough, it's like elevated, and then they're confirming it by just acting like that. But the other guys who get it, they're like, oh yeah, I've like punched the wall, I've thrown something, I've broken this, they just own it.
Right,
and it's
right.
like, okay, well that's fair. And so then you just kind of realize really quickly, like everyone's dealing with the same stuff. Is just oftentimes, especially as kids, like children are learning how to like navigate their emotions, navigate their thoughts. And if you don't have like a good parental figure who can give you that, and it doesn't always have to be your mom and dad. It could be like a teacher, it could be a mentor, a coach, whatever. But if you don't have that, you're not going to learn it. And what I always like to say is like the criminal justice system are just externalized systems that somebody failed to internalize. So like you did something bad, so you go to a judge because you exercise poor judgment. So now a judge has to make a good judgment on your behalf. You lack the ability to control yourself, so now we're going to put you in a prison where all there is structure. So we will control you because you couldn't control yourself.
That makes sense.
And it's like all these things you're supposed to learn as a child. But if your parents are abusing you and you're being given drugs and you're being exposed to violence and you're worried about your safety and you have no food, you're not going to worry about those things. You're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And that's basically what prisons are.
Yeah.
They're just, entities full of people who were trying to survive.
Yeah. And so actually this touches on a topic that, I like, talking to my friends about, which is like that idea of like nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
And so you kind of touched on it a little bit where you can see a lot of the lack of nurture for these people early on that leads to kind of, who they are today. But there is a nature component, which, you with your science background kind of understand a little bit better than me. But like where would you put that mix of how much is nature and how much is nurture when it comes to like people and how they end up acting?
Yeah, I think so. There's like no like number, unfortunately, where we could be like 60% is this and 40% is that. But there definitely is an interplay. And I think from the nature perspective, like what we look at from a like strictly nature, because personality is actually shaped in nurture, but temperament is something that you're kind of born with. It's like, what are your kind of like, what are you predisposed to just as an infant even? Like, right? Like there are some infants that are hypersensitive and like are irritable and crying all the time. And then there's ones that are just kind of like calm and smiling and laughing or don't do anything.
Yeah.
And you hear it with adults speaking. They're like, oh, they're such a good baby, right? Like we even give it a label.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, oh, you're not being loud and you're not interrupting. So you're a good baby for being silent.
Right.
And it's like a baby that's a little fussy or cries too much. We're like, oh, they're, they just have this, or we try to like justify it.
Yeah.
And those are like things that are not trained or like nurture has nothing to do with. But what's more important is like, how does a parent actually meet the need of someone's like nature, right? So like if there is a baby whose temperament is that they're just more fussy, when there's a parent who's not being able to meet that need, that becomes nurture, but then there's a disconnect because it's like I have a need and you're not helping meet that need. And so then I learn like, well, you're the person that's supposed to help take care of me, but you're not. And so then that's how it interplays together. But the other aspect of nature is like even in vitro, right? Like when a mother is pregnant, like what they're exposed to completely impacts how they're going to develop from a neurobiological standpoint. Like, are they being exposed to drugs while the mom's pregnant? Like, is she drinking alcohol? Is she under a lot of stress? Is she in like a domestic violence situation? There's like so many different things that could put stress on a baby. Yeah. And that's all nature. Yeah. Well, that's all nurture impacting the nature because it's literally the development.
Interesting. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And then you have a baby that's born and then you're like, oh, well, why are they so irritable? Or why is it like this? And why is it like that? And it's like, they just feed into each other. But what's really interesting, and I've been thinking about this a little bit, is, we talk about nature, but then we talk about like just the word of God. Yeah. Like how we have like an old nature and then a new nature.
Right, yeah.
And it's like, how does this like conversation, right? How do you kind of bring it into like this third dynamic of like, well, what about the new nature that we've been given, like the nature of Christ? And for me, like that's always interesting because every believer is still struggling with a sinful nature. Right. And yet we're promised and we've adopted a new nature. And so it's like this reality of like new nature, old nature, environment, and like how do all these three things like play together? Yeah. And I think it all comes down to like what you, like for me, I'm a big advocate of like your thought life. Yes. Like what you think is the most important thing about you. And even like scripture will talk about how like you are transformed by the renewing of your mind. Like, Jesus saves us, but he doesn't transform us in the sense of like, he can't get us to think differently. He just tells us think differently. Yeah. He says, take captive every thought. Think what I think, believe my words, like carry my word like it's like a necklace around your neck. Like don't go anywhere without always being mindful of my word. Right. Because thoughts shape everything. And so what you think about yourself, what you think about God, what you think about the world, it's all shaped from like that perspective of like your mindset. Yeah. And so for me, it's like your environment, like things happen to you all the time, but it's this idea of like, well, why do different people react to different things and other people react differently? For example, like if you're like me and you, we could both be in a car accident, right? We could be in the same car accident. And I might get like super anxious about driving on the freeway from that point on. And you might just be like, it's just, unfortunate, but I'll be fine. And you just kind of move on. Yeah. And it's like from a psychological, but also spiritual perspective, it's like fundamentally, what's the difference between us? Why can I no longer drive on the freeway and have so much anxiety around it? And why are you just like, it happened, but I got to get to work. So, so I'll see you later. And you just get in your car and you leave. Yeah. It's like, what's the difference between those two people? And a lot of it is just around what you believe. And it's like the fear of like, well, what if like now I'm not safe? And like having this fear of like, well, what if I get hurt? And like, what if this happens again? And what does it mean that I got in a car accident? And like people have like all these regrets and all these emotions and all these thoughts. And it's like, we're actually instructed to not be victimized by our own thoughts. We're told to like be in control of them. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because they believe everything they think. And they believe everything they feel, not realizing that you're not the byproduct of your thoughts and your feelings. You're the byproduct of what he said. And I think that's where like a lot of people struggle when it comes to like developing identity. Because it could be, because there's so many people, right? With that nature argument, so many people use the claim of like, I was born that way, whatever it might be.
Yeah, whatever it might be. Yeah.
It's like, well, I was born that way. And it's like, that's the like pettiest excuse in the world. Right. That means nothing. Like angry people can say like, well, I was born that way. So I'm just going to go around being violent and having violent outbursts and being aggressive towards everyone. But society's like, we don't care if you're born that way. Or any type of like dysfunction if you see it. Like you might have a desire, you might have like an inclination towards that thing. But that doesn't mean you have to give into that thing.
Yeah.
And I think the greatest like lie is that people start to become what they feel. Like, because I feel this way, I must be this thing. And that's the greatest lie. It's like, no, you're something despite what you feel.
Yeah.
And that's completely in scripture of like, do not be anxious. Like, we're literally given commands about how to control our emotions and how to control our thoughts. And I think people struggle with that from a practical sense. Like, well, how do I do it? But I think the first step is like, well, just don't believe. Just because you're feeling anxious doesn't mean you're a person who suffers from anxiety. And it doesn't mean that you are controlled by that. You could feel anxious to do public speaking, but you could still do public speaking and feel anxious. You could do both.
Yeah, right.
You could start a company and feel insecure. You could, like, why are you waiting to feel secure before you start the thing you want to start?
Yeah.
Do it being insecure.
Yeah, I actually really like this. I mean, you said it really well where it's nature, but then nurture can impact nature, right? And it's kind of, I feel like that maybe that's, I'm asking you all these things because now I can stock some ammo when I go into this argument next. But I really like that. It's like this idea that, you know, it really has to be nature early on, right? Because there's no nurture really happening yet until you're born. And then once you're born, nurture starts to kick in. And it can change a lot of what nature might have you inclined towards.
Right.
But I would actually be curious to hear what you would have to say around this argument about, you know, if you are, you know, let's say born this way, like how do you form that kind of resiliency? You talked about like there's this idea of like rewiring your brain, like cognitive behavioral therapy you talked about. But you've actually mentioned that it's like tied to faith as well, right? So describe the two, because this is actually done without faith, but it's really tied to faith a lot.
I think something that we had talked about was like this idea of like the world gives a language to spiritual things because the world doesn't know any better. So like psychology, for example, right? We have so much language around, we just add secular language around things that the Bible's already talked about. So like, you know, what we call trauma, the Bible calls, or what the world calls trauma, the Bible calls being attacked by the enemy. Like he came to steal, kill, and destroy. That's trauma. And everything that's going on in the world is like his fingerprints on everything, and we just call it trauma. Same thing with like CBT, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy. That's currently the gold standard. It's been the gold standard for quite some time now. It's like the evidence-based, research-backed, most profound way to get people to deal with whatever mental health problem they're coming in with. And it's across the spectrum. It's like individual therapy, couples therapy, men's issues, women's issues, addictions, whatever it might be.
And this is without substances, right? This is just purely like through conversations and like dealing with issues.
Right? This is like talk therapy.
Talk therapy.
Like this is not medication. CBT is like strictly talk therapy. And so it's like you come in and what the world calls CBT, like the Bible talks about, like, you know, coming around, like, again, CBT is like cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's this idea that your thoughts and your behaviors are connected, and you can influence your behaviors by your thoughts, but you can also influence your thoughts by your behaviors, and then your emotions also play a part. And that not any one of those three things, emotions, thoughts, or behaviors, have to be in control. You actually can be kind of like the puppet master outside of those three things, and you can dictate what you want to influence what. So I feel anxious, but I'm going to tell myself that I'm making the commitment to do this thing even though I feel anxious. And you actually, when you do scary things, your brain is conditioned to be like, oh, well, it wasn't that scary. Like exposure therapy, which is a CBT type of therapy, is quite literally facing your fears. Because there's no other way you're going to not feel, you're not going to feel less anxious by avoiding the thing. If anything, it becomes more anxiety provoking because you create this like idea of around it of like, oh, it's gonna, you know, it becomes more scary, it becomes whatever it is, but it's like, no, like, let me just face it. And you know, in exposure therapy, it's like you might start with a picture, right? Some people might be scared of, like, let's say a spider. You're not going to bring in like a gigantic tarantula and be like, here, hold it. You might be like, let's like look at a picture, and let's look at a picture from far away, and then let's bring it closer, and then let's get a rubber spider and like a toy spider, and let's get one that's mechanical where you wind it up and it moves. Like you just slowly expose yourself to it. And so when people say like, oh, well, I can't do that, I get anxious, it's like, no, that's why you have to do it, because that's how you tell your brain. And what's really cool is like the power of imagination is actually extremely powerful, because research is showing that when you imagine yourself doing something that's even anxiety provoking, your brain doesn't know the difference between you like actually doing it and your imagination. So when you're imagining, for example, public speaking, your brain is wiring that experience as if you're doing it. So then you're kind of like just training your brain to be like, oh, like, well, you've done public speaking. Because you keep thinking about, like, well, I'm going to practice public speaking. I'm going to do it in my head.
Right.
And so, but what most people end up doing is the inverse is they get so much anxiety around stuff and they worry about stuff. So then everything becomes an anxious moment. Because they're thinking about it. Their imagination's constantly over like, well, if I do this, or what if that happens? And what if, somebody makes fun of me or whatever it might be, right? And it's like, then everything becomes an anxiety experience because that's what you've conditioned your brain. And then your brain, you have this moment where you're actually presented with an opportunity and your automatic default belief is like, well, I can't do that. It's anxiety provoking. I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. I'm starting to feel tense in my chest. And then you avoid it because you're trying to survive. So,
and that's why they talk about the idea of like visualizing where you want to be, basically, right? You want to see the end goal so that you can achieve the end goal, right? And so I guess, is that all under CBT? Okay,
I mean, you even think about it. I mean, this might be a weird example, but like you think about like Jesus being in the Garden of Gethsemane and then like asking that the cup be passed, right? Because he was experiencing intense emotional distress, right? We could give it secular language. But he was experiencing like extreme emotional distress, and his thoughts were like, I don't want to do this. Can this cup pass by me? Like, if there's a way to avoid this, I'd love to avoid this. And he was able to think ahead. He was able to imagine what the future looks like once he's experienced the cross, he's endured the cross. And that's what he says. He's like, for the joy set before me. So he was able to see the future and be like, even though I feel extremely stressed and under pressure to the point of bleeding, like sweating blood, and then thinking like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. It's going to be excruciating pain. But I know that there's a benefit that comes from it. So I'm going to do something, even though I don't think about wanting to do it and I don't feel like doing it, I'm still choosing to do it because the future outcome is worth the sacrifice. It's that's CBT.
That's really cool. And actually, if you don't know, Pastor Alen actually does this really, you got to watch his last message, but you have this idea of analyzing not just people, but also the devil and Jesus himself in a way, to the best of our ability. But talk a little bit about that, because you use your degree to kind of study this as well, which is probably one of the coolest ways to analyze the Bible, I think.
So like, I mean, even in my message last week, right, I had to give this preference, like this kind of like prefix or disclaimer of like, devil bad, Jesus good. But like, I find the way the devil thinks extremely fascinating. And it is connected to the fact that I'm very much into forensics, right? The criminal mind. Like, he is the father of all criminality, right? So it's like, whenever there's a verse about the devil, I'm always like, what motivates him? What gets him going? What, like, he's the father of lies. Well, like, why? Like, like what got him to do what he did? So I find it very, very fascinating around like just why does the devil do what he does? How does he do it? Like, even the passage around like put on the full armor of God so that you could withstand the schemes of the enemy. It's like, it's a very different thing. We're not withstanding the enemy, we're withstanding his schemes. And the schemes are all psychological and intellectual, because that's literally what that word scheme means. Like in the original Hebrew language, it refers to like a psychological / intellectual like attack. So that's what we're trying to withstand. So the armor of God is in our mind to withstand what he's attacking us in our mind. And so being able to like put him on blast is like the greatest like joy of my life. It's like a little thing I have. I'm like, I'm gonna put you on blast so much. I'm gonna expose all your schemes so people were like, oh, that's the enemy. That's the enemy. Because again, not to like glorify the enemy, but he's described as being perfect when he was a Lucifer. And then and he's full of wisdom. And then in the garden, he's described as a crafty serpent. Well, crafty and wisdom are along the same spectrum. It's just perverted. Perverted wisdom is craftiness, because you're using it for your own gain, right? And so he comes in sly and slick and gets people to think what they think, and he presents a version of a truth. And that's why it's so appealing, and that's why you don't question it right away. He never comes as like the big, scary, evil villain. He comes as a form of light that looks as closest to God as possible to get people to just accept it. And that's what you see happening time and time again. The only person who was able to withstand him was Jesus, and the only way he was able to do it was by quoting the word and quoting it accurately, right? Because the devil came at him with the word also, but he took it and distorted it out of context, but just a couple of degrees. It wasn't like, you are not this, you are not that. He's like, well, if you are, then like turn these rocks into bread. Like, what's the big deal? And he's like, don't test your God. Right? Because like but that's the only way you'll ever know that something isn't really true, is if you expose the actual truth.
I think this is such a cool concept, because I think often, and even in like the church space, it's often, how do I protect the people away from the devil, not prepare them for who he is. It's really like, how do you hide that, learn all about God, but don't know anything about the devil, like just stay completely away. But really, that's what he wants. He wants to work in this kind of place of like stealth, where he can kind of operate, like you said, just schemes, and you think it's just like, oh, if I see him, I just run away. But really, it's like, what is he really trying to do? And then operate in all the areas that it's just really the day-to-day things we do that he's trying to operate in, and trying to pervert the view that we have. And so I think it's really cool to understand what is his actual goal. Then you can understand, how is he perverting this thing that I think I'm doing for good, or I think that is just a normal thing. Is this a common thing that, psychologists or other faith-based psychologists have kind of started studying? Or is this like something that, you feel like it's like a new area?
I don't know any other. I mean, within my world, just professionally, I don't know a lot of believers. But I think I'm just very fascinated by it, because I think it's like, it's the underlining thing of like everything that we do as believers. Like the devil's never going to get us, the church, to believe that God doesn't exist. Like that's so far of a lie that we're like, we're not going to buy that. But he'll get us to believe different versions of God that aren't reality.
I like this,
And the way the devil works, it's like, I've been thinking about this a lot. It's like, how do you silence a liar, right? If he's the father of lies, or like any liar, how do you silence a liar? There's only two ways you can silence a liar. Is one, by exposing the lie with the truth and saying like, yeah, you're lying to me, but I have proof that what you just said was a lie. And that's the word of God. But the other way you silence the liar is by believing everything he says. A liar stops talking the second you've internalized that message and you believed it. So we have a lot of believers who think that they're being attacked by the enemy, but they are actually just running on autopilot. They've already believed the lie. The enemy doesn't need to attack you. You're already operating out of a pretense of a lie. So why would he keep lying? You've already bought into it, and you've silenced him just by believing his lie. And so that's why, like when everyone's always like, our church is huge on like, read your word, community. Like these things are not like little mantras we're checking off because they just sound good in a church. It is the active engagement against the tactics of the enemy. It's in reading the Bible. It's in community. Community isn't just hanging out with someone. Community is, hey, I see you're thinking this way or you're behaving this way, and that's actually not aligned with the word of God. So I'm actually going to call you out lovingly, but I'll call you out because I want you to see that there's this lie you bought into. That's community. And so what I always tell people too is like, be open to feedback. Be open to like when someone says like, hey, that seems like it's not 100% there. Like, don't be so defensive because that's also a tactic of the enemy. It's like getting the quote unquote church hurt or getting offended by something. And it's like, it gives you an excuse to pull away because you feel justified. But all you did was just isolate yourself, and you just doubled down on a lie that you already believed that somebody was just trying to expose.
Actually, on that idea of like spiritual warfare, essentially, how do you distinguish, like if somebody's out there dealing with, addiction, some mental problems or something like that, where they're like, okay, well, what is it? Do I go to therapy and I try and figure it out and I go, do CBT, or is it really, I need to like get into the word and like, it's really just spiritual warfare and I need to deal with that. Like, where do you find that kind of balance?
That's a great question, because I think a lot of people think they have to do one or the other. Like, I fully believe in like miracles, and I believe that the Lord comes in and breaks chains and sets people free. And I've literally have heard testimonies, and I know people who were like addicted and then they weren't. And it was just like an instant thing. And I was like, that's amazing. But the thing is this, like, the Lord can and does deliver people, but for some people, it's less about being set free from your chains and more understanding, why do you like your chain so much? Because I think a lot of people, that's the real issue, right? Because even I forget who mentions it, but I think it's Paul who says like, you're enticed back by your own desires and you make yourself like a prisoner again. So like the Lord set you free, but for some reason you keep looking back. I mean, it's the same concept with Israel and Egypt, right? It's like they were delivered out of Egypt, but they still wanted to go back to Egypt every time life got hard. And that becomes, I think, the marriage of the two. It's like, get in church, accept Jesus as your savior, have him come in and break things and expose things, but you're not going to do it alone. And for a lot of people, community and having one good friend is like more than enough to get you through a lot of stuff. But for some people, they might feel like they can't talk to someone. They don't feel, because there's so much shame around it, so they feel embarrassed to even bring it up to people. Or they might just feel like there's no one that they can talk to. It's like, by all means, go to a therapist. Like, have those conversations. But kind of like what Pastor Adam said, like, I don't agree you should be in therapy for like years and years and years and years and years, because like you would never do that in any other medical context. You would never keep just going to a doctor every single week for an issue that was already resolved. That would be weird. That would actually be like malpractice. Like it would be like very like unhealthy to do that. And so for a lot of people, and I've actually had clients where I've had to be like, I think we've reached like the end of our time together. And they're like, no. I'm like, I think you're paying me to be your friend. And it's kind of like this moment of like, where are your friends? Because like you don't need to get on a call with me to tell me about your week. Like, we're friends. Like, I'm here to very specifically help you with some breakthrough, give you some insight, give you some feedback, help you process things through like some established things that work. But like, if you're just saying like, yeah, so today was a good week, and you know, I did this, and I'm like, I don't need to hear about what you had for lunch. Like, that's not. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your money. And you're wasting my time.
Like, do you feel like it becomes a crutch for some people? Because when you're going to a therapist, it's almost like, I'm not confessing, but I'm telling you all these things and I need some course correction. It kind of goes to what you were saying about like the prison system almost, where it's like, I can't set my own boundaries, so I need to tell somebody so that somebody sets boundaries for me. Is that what it ends up becoming?
100%. Some people, they just need a good friend to listen to. I mean, we already know what the most effective thing in therapy, like talk therapy, the number one most effective thing in making therapy work is what we refer to as rapport. It's the relationship between the therapist and the client. That's literally just like having a good relationship with someone. And like, I've heard so many professionals say this. They're like, a good friend who has the ability to really hear your heart is the equivalent of like a therapist for you, because they're, and it's in the book of Proverbs, right? It's like I forget it specifically, but it's like a wise man draws out the deep things of like another man or whatever. And it's like, yeah, you could actually sit down with someone and just like have a heart to heart. But the thing is, most people avoid that type of like connection because they feel like they won't be accepted. They're going to be judged. And it's so much easier to go to a stranger that you're going to pay, see once a week, just, you know, dump a bunch of stuff on them and be like affirmed, because that's typically how some of the therapy works. It's like, well, I'm so sorry you went through this, as opposed to like, no, like you actually need to get your act together. And so people just feel good about themselves and then they leave.
Actually, let's talk about it, because something that you often talk about with like a group of like boys that get together, like if you have a strong friend group, you always like, if you need boy time, because you need that time to just be able to talk about these things and have somebody, and it kind of goes to what you were saying about, you have such a good relationship with them that you can kind of just talk about anything. And in a group like that, it just feels like there's never any judgment. It's like, you say whatever it is and people call you out in a nice, like, in a way that's like, I don't have to take offense to it. It's like, okay, I trust you so I can hear it. What does make for like a good friend in that way then? Like, would you say, because it's not just a good friend, right? You can kind of find it, you know, in your marriage, in your kids, in your parents, whatever it might be. But like, what are those key characteristics that makes for a good friend?
Yeah, I think honestly the best example is just like how you see Jesus dealing with people who were like, from a societal standpoint, like the outcasts and like the ones that were like the most shamed, like the woman caught in adultery. Like you see how how her society treated her. Like they brought her to him, threw her in the middle, try to shame her publicly. We should like stone her. Like, all judgment, all lack of empathy, lack of understanding. Don't care what her issues are. Just, you did this external behavior, so we're gonna make you pay. And Jesus' response is, okay, well, the first person who is perfect, you cast the first stone. Let's go. Let's take rounds. Because he's the only one qualified to actually cast the stone. Because he's the only one that was perfect, right? And so it's like that understanding of like, yes, you're not perfect. Yes, you've sinned. Yes, you've messed up. But I'm actually not here to judge you. I'm here to help set you free by helping you process this out. So like, not being judgmental. Like, that's profound. And it's like, people who get caught up in their judgmental thing, it's like you forget where you came from. Because you have your own baggage.
Would you say being judgmental is just all projection then? Or is it not purely projection? Like on your own insecurities, I guess.
It could be that for sure, but I think also people have maybe like a standard for people. Like, when you talk about like a lot of church leaders who like fail, they have like quote unquote moral failure, right? I think a lot of times people are so like shaken by that, or like it affects their faith. It's like, oh, well, you weren't perfect, so I'm now doubting God. It's a weird connection, but I could appreciate it because it's like, well, you put him on a pedestal. Right. He became a savior to you in some way, and I feel like sometimes judgment is that. It's like you struggle with this, and it's like, I was never perfect. You just saw me as that. And the more people do that, that's why like I actually don't like language when parents tell their children they're perfect. Like, oh, you're my perfect little whatever. It's like, well, first of all, they're not. That's a lie. But second of all, like, what is the standard? Like, are we like, do they always have to like then meet that level of like performance?
Right.
And so I tell my kids, I'm like, you're not perfect, but I love you despite that.
Right.
Like, you are not perfect, and I love you. My love doesn't even waver a little bit because you're not perfect. I love you equally, whether you were or you weren't. And it's like understanding, like, I don't need to be perfect. I can make mistakes. I can mess up. I can whatever. And like my kids are very comfortable. Like, I'm sorry I did this. I'm sorry I did that.
Yeah.
And it's like, thank you for apologizing. And then when there needs to be a consequence, but most of the time when they come to me, like when they confess, when they come to me and they tell me what they've done, there isn't a punishment.
Yeah,
because it's like you coming to me and you owning it and you apologizing and me forgiving you, like that's more profound than, well, now you get a 10-minute timeout.
Yeah,
like, what is that going to do?
Can I ask then, how do you set the right expectations? Because you can't set no expectations because then there's no growth, right? But how do you set the right expectations without, getting to that point where you're like, oh, you didn't meet my unexplained expectations, and now I have judgment.
Yeah, I think it's understanding that people, like, we have a standard we move towards, but like we're never going to actually achieve that standard. And I would argue that that's actually true across any dynamic where you are leading somebody else. So whether it's parenting, whether it's church, whether it's business, whatever you're doing, it's like we obviously all have a standard, but we all know that standard is something we're increasingly moving towards.
Yeah, okay.
And really, if you think about it, you're never going to achieve it, but you can get closer and closer. And for me, for example, like if my kids say something they shouldn't say, if they say a bad word or whatever, it's not like you are not allowed to ever speak those languages or those words ever again. And if you do, it's the end. It's like, hey, you know better than to use words like that.
Yeah.
And I'll take him to like, especially my son, he's older. So like he's more able to like read and appreciate like biblical passage, but I'll take him to like a passage that says like no unwholesome talk should come out of your mouth. But then I don't just like make it a law, because anything that's law you don't internalize. I always try to connect it to the heart of the Father. Like, well, why does God not want us to use vulgar language? Like, what does that actually connect to?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, people don't feel like they can come to you if you're like vulgar and judgmental and like crass and like because those people end up having all these other issues. And Proverbs talks about it, like stay away from a angry man, or a person who can't have like self-control, or a person who has no reign over their tongue. Why? Because they invite hostility, they invite problems, they invite this. So it's like connecting it to that. It's like, hey, listen, like and I'll explain it to my kids. I'm like, you guys mess up in this house, and we have so much grace for you guys because it's our job to teach you. But the world is not going to be accommodating to you as much as your mom and dad will be. And you're young, so the world is forgiving. It's like, oh, they're a little kid, they're learning. But the older you get, the less this world is going to care. And they're going to eventually get to a point of like, they don't care why you did what you did. They're just going to want to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
And so that's the dynamic I use of like, I have expectations for you, but I understand that those expectations will not be met 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But in the moments where they're not met, how I respond is more important than what they just did. Because I could come down with power, I could come down with authority, I could come down with shame, with guilt, with regret, with like severe consequences. I believe in consequences, but if it's so disproportionately out of alignment from like what happened, it actually, nobody cares about what that person did anymore. Like that person won't think about what they did. They'll just think about how extreme you were. So then it's like, what was the point of the consequence? Just to make you feel better? Because that's really what ends up happening with a lot of people. So I think it's just that. I think it's like you have the standards and you remind people and you hold people accountable. But I think we're afraid of that word because we think like holding someone accountable is like, I'm going to blast you and it's going to be painful. It could be painful sometimes. Growing and learning and adjusting and evolving and all that stuff could be painful. But when it's all for like the good of you, and you could show that to someone, like I know like you don't want this timeout, but I really think like if you sit and understand like you can't do this, and I want you to have this consequence so you can connect it to this behavior, so that next time if that opportunity ever comes up, you don't do it. That's why I'm giving you this timeout. It's not to make me feel better because I feel like you should be on timeout. So I think that's where it is.
I actually really like that dynamic of how you go about that, because now I'm starting to think that the other way, which is this is the way it is and this is how you have to do it, may just be out of laziness maybe, because really the way that you're talking about is it takes a little bit longer because you have to then empathize with the person in front of you and why they did the thing they did. And then now let's figure out can you understand it the way I do? And then it's now being vulnerable a little bit about how you think of the world, and so that they can see it. The other way is just, I don't want you to see any side of how I think. This is the way it is. And then you got to go about it. And maybe that's where, kind of power can kind of corrupt, where it's like, you don't really take the time to learn about the person on the other side. It's just, this is the way I see it, and now this is the way it has to be.
Yeah, and I think from like a macro to a micro, right? Like I can appreciate like CEOs or business like owners or whatever, where they're thinking from a macro perspective of like culture, right? Like we need to protect culture, we need to correct culture, and culture is like it's literally the same kind of thing that you're doing when you're like trying to correct someone on an individual level, but you're doing it on a macro so everyone can see like, hey, we actually don't do that in this company because it doesn't align with our values. So we're going to make these adjustments. Now, real good mentorship or real good like leaders will have a streamline in place to where like you might be like the boss and the CEO of something, but it's like, hey, like this person over here, like they did this and we're going to correct culture and we're going to explain to everyone like that's actually not cool. But I really hope that the direct supervisor can have a one-on-one, try to get to the bottom of like, why did that happen? Like, can you unpack it? What was the thing that caused it to happen in the first place? And oftentimes you see so much dysfunction in organizations because people are insecure. They feel like they need to perform. So then they like cut each other, right? They try to make each other look bad so they can look good. And then stuff like that, if you should address it on a macro level, on a like the cultural level. But then it's like getting to the heart of like, well, why do you feel the need to be seen all the time? Like, could you just do something and not get any credit for it? Like, is that something that happens? That's why I appreciate like what we do at our church with like our kind of discipleship model we have. It's like every single member is connected to a direct like pastoral care kind of like line. So it's like you should never wonder, who do I go to? Or you should never be confused if like your like direct pastoral care team comes to you and says like, hey, like, how are you doing? Or, hey, I just saw that, or I heard this. Are you okay? Like, that should be like the most like inviting thing of like, oh, I have people who are actually checking in on me, care about me, and like, or they see something on me, or they saw me do this or saw me do that. It's out of alignment from my character or from like the word of God, and they're actually holding me accountable. People should appreciate that because it's so, everyone like sees the world from their perspective, which obviously that's just how we navigate life. But like, it's really, really awkward to be the recipient of someone correcting you, but it's equally awkward to be the one who has to bring the correction. Like, it's both vulnerable, it's both uncomfortable, and it's like understanding like if that person actually went beyond their discomfort to actually say something to you about like, hey, like I actually see you acting out of alignment from like what you should be doing and or what the word of God says. You know how much courage it took for that person to say that to you? Right. And the fact that they did it despite that awkwardness means that they really value you and they really appreciate you. The single most like indicator that someone doesn't care about you is like they see you messing up and they're kind of like, whatever. Yeah. It's like there's no standard, there's no expectation. I say that to my clients, like at the prison. Like they'll act a fool and I'll be like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, well, you do this. I'm like, yeah, I put the standard on you because I expect you to actually fulfill it. Right. Like, I would never put the standard on that person because I know they can't fulfill it. I'm like, so me actually expecting more from you was a compliment. And like they've never heard that kind of language, so to them it feels like it's just an attack. But when you explain it of like you actually can do it, that's why I asked you to do it. It's like, oh, you believe something in me that I don't even see in myself. And it's the craziest thing when grown men who are like, tatted all over their face, who are like super violent, and then they break down crying because you believe in them. Right. It's the weirdest thing. I still haven't gotten used to it. But it just shows like even the toughest exterior has a desire to be validated and seen. And it's just the nature of people. We want to be validated. But if you're just coming at people with like this harsh tone, you're not reaching them.
Actually, you're curious then, because there's two sides of that. Kind of like you say, it takes two to tango, right? There's one side which is delivering the news, and then there's the other side that has to receive it. And I think the receiving side is kind of often overlooked. Like, how do you advise somebody to then properly be able to receive that kind of feedback and criticism? Without throwing it back, like, like, why do you do this? Like, how do you
think the automatic response for most of us is like defense. It's like, well, or justification. Well, I did it because of. And I think if people just realize like, it's okay. Like for me, like something I always say, it's like your opinion of me is none of my business. Like you could hate me, you could love me. Either way, like you're entitled to your opinion. Right. And it comes down to more like identity. Like the more and more you believe what God thinks about you than what you think about you, the less you'll be personally attacked when someone says something. Because then it's not like this attack. It's like, I know I'm not perfect. So like when my wife Or even when my kids, that's the most humbling when your kids say it. Like, Dad, you blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's like shock because like they see it. I'm like, if they could see it, like that's bad.
Yeah, right.
But like for me, it's kind of like being open to hearing what they experienced. One example, I used to do this thing. I don't do it anymore because it's like whatever. But I used to do this thing where I'd like text my best friends. I had like 5. And I would text them in a group text like, hey, 3 things, I want you guys to respond back to me, 3 things you like about me, and 3 things you wish I would either stop, correct, whatever, like things that are weaknesses.
Yeah.
And like everyone would, most people will respond to positives and be like, I don't really see anything negative. I'm like, you're lying.
Yeah.
But like vast majority of them, the number one thing that they all said was, we love that you're non-judgmental. But then I had one friend respond and say, I feel like you're a little judgmental. I was like, that's really interesting because like I have these 4 friends who are saying I'm non-judgmental. I like to think of myself as non-judgmental. I mean, for my line of work, I just listen to people confess doing some of the most extreme things in the world.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, let's work through that.
Right.
So I'm like, I like to think that that's something I don't have. But instead of being defended of like, well, you're wrong because everybody else says I'm non-judgmental, my go-to question was, I wonder what I've said or have done to make her think that. So just trying to understand. I think if people would just try to understand where the other person's coming from and not having an agenda of responding, that would solve so many other problems. And the number one killer of any relationship, and this is like rooted in evidence, any relationship, whether it's intimate, professional, whatever, is assumption. So many people think they know why the person's saying what they're saying, and they operate and they respond from the assumption of, well, you're saying that, and they don't say it to the person, they just assume it, and then they respond back. And I don't know if you've heard the term self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's this idea of like, oh, they're just jealous of me. So then you react as if they're jealous of you, and then they get offended because you're coming at them with the tone when they thought they didn't come at you with the tone. So then they respond with like this aggression, and you're like, see, I knew it. I knew they were jealous of me. And it just feeds into itself. So like the number one thing is like, don't assume you know the intention of people. Because there are even people who are very cocky about it of like, I know that this is why they said what they said. It's like, did you ask them? It's like, no. I'm like, then you don't know. Because people will ask me too. They're like, can you like read people? Can you read their nonverbals? Can you like pick up when someone's lying? I'm like, I could read people's nonverbals more than I care to. I don't want to. I'd rather not. But like, I pick up when people do certain things or say certain things. But I'll never know the why behind it. I can never know the why behind it unless I care enough to ask. And if I don't care enough to ask, then I shouldn't be offended by it in the first place. If I'm not going to put myself on the line, be like, hey, I noticed you like roll your eyes when I said that. Why did you roll your eyes? I could take it as like, oh, they disagree with what I'm saying and they think I'm dumb. But it could be like, oh, I just remembered when I was a kid, my mom said that to me and it made me feel really bad. So I'm just like kind of like trying to like just look away because I actually was getting emotional and I didn't want you to see that. It's like,
but what a different dynamic, right? Like, you took it on as offense to you, but it was really them dealing with something, which is 90% of the time, it's just me dealing with my own thing than me, attacking somebody else.
And I'll say the number one thing you could do as a communicator, if you're the one initiating feedback, the one thing you could do before you even let the person respond is say what you're going to say. Like, hey, I've noticed this, even with like your spouse, with your kids, whatever it might be. And then follow up with, before you respond, what do you think I just said to you? Like allow them to actually communicate back to you how they filtered your words. Because we all filter through our own perceptions, our own experiences, our own insecurities. So perfect example. It's like my wife, I'm like the biggest clean freak. And I remember once I walked into the house and the house was just a mess because we have 2 little kids and that's what happens in life. And I just made a comment under my breath of like, oh man, the house is so dirty. And my wife's response was, well, I've been working all day. Like, were you expecting it to be clean? And I got so confused by that because I wasn't even talking to her. I was just making an observation. I was like, and it was about to be one of those things where like I puffed up of like, oh, are you coming at me? Because I'm going to come back at you now. And I just stopped. I was like, wait, what do you think I just said? Because all I said was, oh, the house is so dirty. She's like, oh, well, you're like, the house is so dirty. I've been home all day. Why haven't you cleaned it? Like she added all these things because it's like that's her experience. Those words she filtered through her experience, through her insecurities, through her whatever, and that's what she was responding to. I'm like, but that's not what I said. She's like, but that is what you said. I was like, no, I was actually making an observation because I'm thinking to myself like, oh, the house is dirty. Like I'm going to clean it up now. Like I'm tired, but I'm going to clean it up now. I had no expectation. And I remember when I said that to her, I saw her like deflate, like, oh, and I was like. And I think she said it. She's like, well, how about we just have dinner and we clean it up together? I'm like, cool. So now, like, that's my thing. It's like, I'll say something. And if I notice even if I don't notice it, but especially if I notice some kind of like weird look, a little tense, a little like whatever, I'm like, before you respond, like, what do you think I just said to you? And it's actually shocking how often it's not anything what I meant. And it's completely something, and that's why you see so many people arguing, like couples. They're arguing because they're not talking about the same thing. They're talking about two different things, and they're frustrated that they're not understanding. It's like, you're not talking about the same thing. That's why you're arguing. Same thing happens in team dynamics, right? Like in like a work setting, it's like you think you're communicating clearly, but you're not, because you actually didn't give the person to repeat back to you. Did you understand what I actually said? And if not, it's like, well, this is what I heard. And it's like, oh, no, I actually didn't mean that. This is what I mean. Can you actually repeat back what I said now? And I think that's actually really been helpful in just
that's a really good tip, because I think when you're in an argument, what you end up seeing is you're actually just thinking about your next argument. You're really just thinking to yourself.
Nothing they say.
And everything they're saying is really just you giving yourself time to think about your next argument. But if you do have that, because then you'll realize, oh, maybe I didn't actually even hear what you were saying. Man, all of these skills seems like such a superpower in every facet of life. And so like, and that's why I think this conversation is really cool to chat about, like psychology and just understanding the human condition, because you can kind of take it. We talked about marriage, we talked about caring of kids, we talked about business, but it's like everywhere, every facet of life. But I want to just chat with, our audience is primarily of like kingdom builders, entrepreneurs. I asked this to Pastor Rex when he was here, but do you believe everybody can be a leader, or everybody can be like an entrepreneur and start their own thing? Or are some people more inclined to do one or the other? Or is it just a matter of training that can kind of get you there?
I believe everyone has the capacity for it. I think that certain people have maybe natural skills and talents, and other people have to maybe work it out a little bit more. But I think the vast majority of people just resort to the mindset of, that's not for me. And it could be for several reasons. For example, when you ask somebody, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, like I think Medea talked about it this last Sunday. It's like what kids answer versus what adults answer is like fundamentally different, because kids don't think from the place of restriction or impossibility, or possibility, I should say. But adults do. We think of everything that's like, I can't do, so then whatever's left is the things I'm going to try to do, right? And I think that's what it is. I think people have the capacity for it, but there are different, and it's important to note, like there are different like psychological traits that will either allow you to do that or not. Like, are you somebody who's like motivated? Like, are you intrinsically motivated, or are you extrinsically motivated? Like some people are like, I go to work because I'm passionate about what I do and I love people and I want to help people. And other people are like, I'm here for the paycheck. Like if I didn't have to work for money, I would not be doing this. And I don't think one is wrong or one is right. It's just understanding what motivates you. And for some people, it's like, well, I'm miserable at my job. It's like, well, because you're not doing the thing that you're not motivated about what you're doing. And I'm not like so fluffy and aspirational, like, well, go and be a painter for the rest of your life and like be poor. It's like, no, that's not reality either, because you still have responsibilities and things like that. But it's like, how do you actually navigate and move in the direction of? But I find like most people don't believe they can. They're afraid of the criticism that they will get when they inevitably fail. I think the most successful people are the people who just are like understand failure as part of the process. It's just like, I will fail. It's the same thing with addiction, actually. It's funny how there's a similarity between failure and the process of success, and addiction and the process of sobriety, because in addiction, you are expected to relapse. It's part of the process. It's actually one of the steps. It's like, you will relapse inevitably. And it is a part of it. But it's like, with failure and with relapse, it's the same thing. It's how quickly you are able to get back on pursuing the thing you were pursuing. That's the number one indicator of whether or not you'll be successful, is how fast that gap is closed between failure and trying again. Because some people will fail and then they internalize it, the enemy, right? You didn't just fail, you are a failure.
Your identity.
So what failure pursues endeavors to be successful? I'm a failure. Why would I? That's illogical for someone who's a failure to pursue success, right? And so you just sit arrested. And so then, versus the person who's like, oh, I failed, this was an event, it's not me, but you know what, tomorrow I'm just going to get back up and try again. The people who can close that gap and make it as small as possible are extremely more successful. The people who put the gap in between of like, I failed and I'm not going to try, you end up actually not being as successful, because you have internalized so much of that language.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I've lost the momentum. Because a lot of it too is momentum. Like when you're in something all the time, it's almost like second nature to you. So then it's almost like you're breathing it, you're thinking it. It's like natural.
Yeah.
But when you give it some time and you give it some space, you can actually start losing it. And then it's like, just getting things activated. The activation for most people is the hardest part than the sustaining or maintaining.
Yeah, right.
It's like the start is always hard, but once you get going, it's almost like it starts to pick up its own speed. So I think it's that. I think people are not as motivated. I think people have insecurities or beliefs around like, oh, I'm not cut out for this. This isn't who I am. I think people over-identify with their feelings. Well, I feel anxious to public speak, so therefore I will not public speak. And it's like, well, feel anxious and public speak. Who said you have to feel comfortable doing the things you do? Like, who made that rule for you? But again, a lot of people have learned that, or they are taught that. It's like, oh, well, like, for example, kids, they join a sport, they join some kind of activity, it's a little bit hard, they have some resistance, I want to quit. It's like, well, just because it's hard doesn't mean you quit, it just means that you figure out what your roadblock is. But depending on how you're raised, it's like, oh, that was hard, you want to quit? Okay, that's cool. Oh, that was hard, you want to quit? Okay, that's cool. Maybe sometimes they really don't enjoy it. It's like, this isn't fun for me, this is boring, I tried it, it's not my cup of tea. Okay, that's fair. You tried it, it wasn't for you. But if because it was uncomfortable, it was anxiety provoking, it was challenging, it was hard, and you want to quit, well, you're not going to be able to. Like our son was in karate and he got kicked in the face and actually gave him like a little black eye. And he's like, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm all like, oh no, you just got to get back in there. I'm like, that's going to heal. He's like, but it hurt. I'm all like, yeah, but it'll heal. Like, you'll be fine. And it was like, it took a moment and there was some anxiety around it, but then he got to like do a little bit more practice, and then he got more confident in himself because he knew how to like block that kick, and like now he's fully in it. He's like, I want to get my black belt. Like now his mindset has changed because he believes in himself. So it's a lot of different things, but like that's why it's so hard to get people unstuck. Like you think about, we are the most educated, we have the most access to information, we have a bajillion, like we have so many podcasts with so many people who come on and do so many different things. We have all these self-help books, but what's crazy is we have more depression, more anxiety, more suicidality, more insecurity than ever before. We have all this wealth of knowledge, but people are actually less confident and more insecure and more doubtful of themselves. And you wonder, like, what is causing that? What is causing that inverse? We have more knowledge on how to be successful. But people are not internalizing it because people are believing, again, thought life. It's like, I have all this access to, like, I would argue before we knew better, like one reason why people weren't successful is just because they didn't know how to be successful. Like, how do you make a successful business? How do you make a successful team? How do you make a successful whatever? But I feel like we're in a place in the world where like we know how to do that. Like there's literally tutorials of like, how do you start a business? How do you start a church? How do you start a nonprofit? Like they literally give you break, step-by-step instructions, and people still don't do it. And it's like, again, the people have just believed something about themselves. So for
actually
me,
like on that same topic, where this idea of there's just so much more depression now, and for entrepreneurs out there, for people that are, see the other side of it, and they see a successful leader, and they think, oh, this is the thing that I want to get. I'm going to chase this success. But you actually find that when you get there, it's not all, grass is greener on the other side. There's a lot of depression. There's a lot of still like, I haven't reached that point and I'm still chasing something. Where do you find that gap between success and that idea of like never actually being able to attain it? And then what causes this kind of depression?
Yeah, I think the pursuit of stuff is actually pretty healthy. Like when we have a drive to pursue something, I think once we obtain it, that's where it becomes dangerous because we realize that all of these different things aren't going to fill a void that we're all trying to like pursue. And it goes back to like faith. Like God is the only one who can fill that need to feel seen and have purpose. I mean, like the book of Ecclesiastes, right? Solomon, if there was ever a prototype of success, it'd be him. He was the wealthiest. He had peace during his time. He had so much of like status to where people from other parts of the world were traveling just to hear him speak. Like talk about influence. Like you have all these things, and he at the end of it kind of like comes to a conclusion of like none of that really mattered. And it seemed like the book of Ecclesiastes, I think a lot of people see that like, oh, Solomon in his old age, he's just like miserable and unhappy. I actually completely see the opposite of that. When I read that book, I'm like, oh, he actually has the most clarity he's ever had, because he's actually coming from a place of like, I obtained status, I obtained wealth, I obtained quite literally 1,000 wives. Like, I've obtained all these things that from a societal standpoint, from a world standpoint, it's like success. Check. You've checked it all off, and it was all for nothing. None of it mattered. It all produced nothing. It all came, it all went. We stressed for nothing. We were anxious for nothing. We were depressed for nothing. We worked hard for nothing. And it seems like he's saying, don't try. What's the point of working? What's the point of creating? What's the point of establishing or whatever? That's not what he's saying. He's saying anything that you do work towards, make sure there's an eternal or kingdom impact to it, because that's the only thing that lasts. Like, what's the point of you working so hard and accumulating all this wealth, only that you'll be buried and then everyone else gets it once you're dead? Like, what's the point of that? And it's like, yeah, then maybe we have this idea of like a legacy, but we all know too, like, when the next generation gets a blessing that they weren't equipped to handle, it just destroys them. And we've seen that time and again. And so it's the same kind of this idea of like, if you're going to build for something that actually matters. And anything can still be that. It doesn't mean like everyone, quit your jobs and plug into a church. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean serve in your church, because there is an eternal kingdom impact definitely there. But your work can all be eternally focused if you pursue it the right way. Like my work, I work with a bunch of criminals. So like some people could say like, well, how is that kingdom advancement? It's like, if I could just get one person to believe one less lie about themselves, that's for me, that's kingdom advancement. Because I just came against the enemy and we won. I spoke a truth. He believed the truth over the lie. That silenced the enemy just one more degree. And it's like, yes, he might have all these other stuff he's dealing with, but at least that's one. And maybe we could build upon that. Maybe that's a seed that the Lord will use later on in his life somewhere else. So it's like everything could be that. Maybe you're a barista. Maybe you're a nanny. Maybe you're a stay-at-home mom. Like, you can always have an eternal kingdom impact with whatever you do. And it could be like the most mundane job, but how you connect with people, how you speak into people, how you carry. My wife is like the best example. She works for Kaiser, which is, like not anything related to like church or faith, but the one thing that she's always recognized for is like the joy she brings to the meetings. And people literally say, and it's the funniest thing because they use secular language, but they're like, whenever you're on a call with us, it's like there's this joy that comes into the meeting, or there's like this light that comes into the meeting. And it's like, yeah, because she's literally carrying the spirit of like the Lord, and she's releasing joy because she's so genuinely like excited and happy and like understands like her, like who she is in the Lord. And she's just like, comes from that place, and everyone's affected by it to the point where people will reach out to her on the side and be like, hey, like, can I talk to you? I'm going through something. And they'll be like, I don't know what you believe, but I'm going through this. And my wife will just be like, yeah, let's grab coffee, or let's get on a call really quick. And it's like they see something, and she does nothing related to faith at her job, but people still pick up on something, and then she'll lean into that when those moments present themselves. So I think that's where that gap is people are building towards something that they think will make them, will give them something that it doesn't. I think that's also why the Bible talks about like God and money. Like, you could only serve God or money. I think it's very interesting that it's money and not anything else. Like, it could have been so many other things, like God and lust, God and self, God and whatever, but it's money. And it's like, what does money actually produce for you? Money will get you to believe that you are a God, right? If you get enough of it, you will start to think as if like, because what does it mean to be like a God? It means to be like self-sufficient, to rely on yourself. And that's really what happened to Solomon, right? He accrued a bunch of wealth, so then he became his own provider. He gathered a bunch of horses, which is like, do not, like, it was a law for the kings of Israel, like, do not gather a bunch of horses, because it was connected to military power. Because like God was supposed to be the one that always went before them in war, but he accrued a bunch of horses and like military weapons, and it became his mindset of like, well, look how much military power I have. So his focus shifted. It's like, I'm not relying on God for provision. I'm not relying on God for protection. And then it was like, do not marry a bunch of foreign wives because they'll turn you away from me, which is exactly what happened. And it's like, all these things are there for a reason. And it's that same thing of like rules and standards. It's like that gap happens because when you start to accrue wealth, you could very much start to lose. It's so easy. And I think everyone has this idea of like, man, God could trust me with $1 billion. I see it so much. I hear people talk about it, but then when like I'm on, like, you know, I see some like random video of like someone being very generous, and then you go into the comments, it's like man, if only God, if only God trusted me with $1 million. I'm like, everyone's convinced that they would say exactly the same with a large amount of money, but like, we see people's tides go down when they get a promotion, which you would think would be the inverse. But people start paying less because there's like, oh, I have more now. And it's like you want to keep it because you think it was about what you did. And it's the same thing. So I think it's that's the gap that's missing, is people are pursuing purpose in achievement and accolades and titles. But once they reach it, it's like, oh, this is actually not anything.
Could I frame it this way? And I don't know, maybe you can agree or not, but would you say then that like your purpose being in the world, even if you set some like lofty goal, it's actually achievable, because the things of the world are achievable. But if you say your kingdom purpose to God and to the kingdom, it can actually be unachievable. And it's that pursuit of God never being achieved on earth, which is why it's better. Like you're always, because they say the journey is what makes you so happy, right? It's not the actual destination. In a way, I don't know, I'm trying to think through this, but like the destination obviously is, you know, where we're trying to go. But like maybe it's that pursuit of kingdom purpose that allows us to never be depressed, because we're always chasing this thing that we can't really achieve by ourselves. And maybe that's, you know, part of it.
No, 100%. Because at the end of the day, like, let's say you achieve success in whatever thing you were creating or service you're providing or whatever it is. Whatever success is to you, like, you've achieved it. So like, now what? Like, what does that do for you? Are you just now, because again, I think we are people who are very easily bored, and we grow accustomed to our new normal very quickly. So if I go from being a thousandaire to a millionaire, that high will last for a while, but then being a millionaire will be my new norm. And it's like, well, this is now my new life, and this is now my new society and community, and this is now what I have access to. And we adjust very quickly. And if people who don't have the capacity to navigate those things well, then they start to forget who they are. And that's the other thing. A lot of people are striving for success, and they're not moving from a place of like, God's already called me to do something. Like they're trying to achieve what God's already accomplished. And so when they reach that thing, they are like, wait, I don't feel fulfilled. It's like, no, because you are striving for value and worth in those things. And those things can't. They literally can't. Like, it literally is the origin story of like Adam and Eve. They were pursuing an external thing in the world, right? The fruit. And they thought that would make them like a God. And the response was, oh, we actually lost sight of what actually mattered. And we're actually going to go hide now because we're ashamed. And it's kind of like, it's almost like that. It's like you are pursuing these external apples on trees because it means you'll be like a God, and it means something. And it's like, yes, you might get money, you might get stuff, and that none of that stuff is bad. It's not bad, but if that stuff becomes your God, if that's the thing that you were hoping was going to give you value, you're going to be grossly disappointed. And I would argue that most, if not all, of Hollywood is the great like theological and psychological experiment of like super successful people, a lot of fame, a lot of wealth, a lot of access to a lot of different stuff, and you have the highest depression rates, suicide rates in Hollywood than you do anywhere else. You have people like Robin Williams, like there's just Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, like all these super successful people, and they end up like taking their own lives or numbing themselves. And it's like, if that's not enough, then to like show you that doesn't do anything for people. Then, you know, and then now like in today's society, I've heard like, I'd rather cry in my like Bugatti than in my like Camry or something. Like if I'm gonna be miserable, I'd rather have the Bugatti. And it's like I could appreciate the sentiment behind that of like what they mean, but at the same time, it's like you just believe that you still have to cry. Like you don't realize that there's actually a hope. In either situation, you could be in your Bugatti and have hope. But like, why do you think that that's your only option? And it's like that's the mindset we're working against. But that's the mindset of the world. And we sound to the world, and this is biblical, right? To the world, like this conversation, if the world's watching it, is going to be like, they're so illogical. Like they think we have a problem because we're like not about the we're about pursuit of excellence, but it's not for the sole purpose of gaining things.
Yes, yeah,
it's actually to be resourced to be able to impact the world in a way that allows the kingdom to infiltrate.
Yeah.
Like that's our heart. And that's a great pursuit, but it's all about how you do it.
Yeah.
And like, you don't always have to be like overly churchy about things. Like, you'll have to fact check this, but my understanding is like Colgate, like the toothpaste company, is like a Christian company.
Oh, okay.
Or like In-N-Out.
Yeah,
like
In-N-Out, yeah.
they're not sitting there like, holding devotionals every day.
Before you order.
Before you order. But the way they operate their business, the way they engage with their employees, the way they connect with customers, even the way they pay their customers. They have some of the highest paying like hourly rate positions, like even in like California. It's like the way they honor and the way they like go about doing certain things, that is advancing kingdom stuff. And they're not overly like screaming Jesus all day at you. And you don't have to. If you want to, you can, but that's not a requirement.
Right.
You could do things that are kingdom oriented very subtly, and infiltrate people's hearts with that approach.
Yeah, I think we could keep going forever, which is unfortunate that I have to put an end to this podcast.
No, I get it.
But I just want to put this out there. You mentioned to me before this that you were thinking about doing a podcast. I really genuinely mean this, that you should 100% start a podcast, because I think this is a wealth of knowledge that you have, and your ability to kind of speak on it from a faith background, I think is so important and so well done, because this isn't just a skill that, you can take on and it doesn't take work, but it's like, it's like repetition, right? Like you got to keep doing and using these skills, because even for you, it's like you were talking about these, like times in your marriage. You would think that you have a superpower where it's like you've done it once and you never have to. It's constant, right? Like
it's almost worse.
Yeah. So I mean, like if it is any sign for you to start your own podcast, please do it. I know I have a list of questions I want to ask you, and so we'll definitely have you back on. I know Pastor Adam would be cool to do it with all three of us when he's back on. So
that'd be really fun.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. And if this is your first time listening, please share this podcast. I think this one will help a lot of people. Like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode. Cheers, guys.